Hello, friends. For those of you who have not joined us before, I am AnnaLee Dragon. I am the director of the Kinderhook Memorial Library, and each Monday I do a book talk. So I pick a subject, or you pick a subject, depending on if I hear from you or not, and I talk about some of my favorite books that fall into those categories. And this week I thought, since it's kind of cold and winter is starting to be right around the corner and setting in, and things with COVID are kind of kicking up again, and we're all kind of trapped inside, I thought, why not do adventures? Let's do some armchair traveling, because we can't really travel right now, and I know I am missing that immensely. I don't know how you feel, but I am very much missing the ability to get on a plane and go somewhere fun. So these stories are not all the kinds of places you would necessarily go for fun. They're adventure stories. They're some of my favorites, and there's some strange stuff and some maybe stuff that's kind of dangerous, which is why I prefer armchair adventuring, because it doesn't put me in any peril, but I get to have that simulated fear that we talked about the other day. And just, it's really brave, gutsy stuff, and I enjoy those kind of books. So these are all nonfiction reads this week, and I hope that you will like some of them. I'm going to put the covers of each book at the end of the talk, so if you want to look any of them up, they're all available in the catalog. I have some of them here with me, and some of them I do not, but we'll talk about them all, and then I'll put the covers at the end, and you can look them up or stop by and browse or let me know, and I will be happy to help you get one of these titles. So the first book I wanted to talk about today is called Savage Harvest. It is by Carl Hoffman. The subtitle is A Tale of Cannibals, Colonialism, and Michael Rockefeller's Tragic Quest for Primitive Art. Several of those things intrigue me, so I picked this book up. This came out 2014, I think, so it was a while ago. Basically, it was a story, getting back to some little known history that I did not know about. Michael Rockefeller was the son of Nelson Rockefeller, who was the New York governor in the 1960s. And Nelson was obsessed with primitive art, and he wanted to give it a showplace. And so he would send himself and his son particularly out on missions to little known locales to try and obtain primitive art for his collection, his museum that he was building. And this is the story of his son going on one of these missions. He had been on several trips to New Guinea and developed a relationship with some of the tribes there, some of whom were still cannibals at the time. And one of the trips, he just doesn't come back. And so it is still a fairly unsolved mystery. They have theories about what happened, but they do not know for sure because he was never found. His father went there and looked for him, and they were unable to locate him. So we don't know what happened, but it is a super cool adventure story and things I didn't know about. And a lot of the collection of artwork that was gathered by the son, Michael, is in, I think it's one of the museums in New York City, one of the major, I don't think it's the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I think it might be Natural History, or one of the major museums has this collection of all of these things that he was able to bring back and send back from his trips there. So you can learn a lot about New Guinea is such a remote location and not a place I know much about. So I found this book totally fascinating, riveting, and it's got this adventure element and things gone wrong and family drama and, yeah, it was all of the good things, and I really enjoyed reading it, and I kind of like that you don't exactly know what happened at the end. It's a real mystery, which that drew me along. So, Savage Harvest by Carl Hoffman. The next book I have to talk about is called The Lost City of Z, A Tale of Deadly Obsession in the Amazon, by David Gran. Now, this one was made into a movie, which I have not seen, so I cannot speak to how good it is, but the book is excellent. So this is the story of a man in the 1920s. His last name was Fawcett. He was Percy Fawcett, and he was an explorer. So this is the time that the National Geographic Society was mapping the world. So they were sending people out to the least mapped locations to try and develop maps of the known world for everybody else. And so Percy was one of these people sent to South America to help map the Amazon, which is notoriously one of the most difficult places to map, and still to this day is not exactly mapped, because the forest is so dense and there are so many dangerous things, and it's very remote and hard to get to. So in his trips there, Percy became obsessed with the city of Z he kept hearing about, myths about. And so he went back multiple times in his life. And the last time he went back, he actually went with his son, who was an adult at the time. And he took him back on a mapping trip. He passed this obsession on to his son, basically. And again, they never came back. So we don't know what happened. There are, again, theories, and they give many of the theories in the book, but we don't know what happened to him. And nobody will ever really know. But I thought that it was just really great, all the Indiana Jones kind of adventure stuff. There's the academic element with the history of the National Geographic Society, and I didn't know about all of that. And then there's the Amazon rainforest and the natural dangers and the encounters with tribes of people who have never come into contact with white people before, and the multiple trips back and forth, which every one of them, there was a chance he wouldn't come back. All of these explorers knew that, which is kind of crazy to me. Like, you really have to be very brave, I think, and very invested in it, which he was. It became, one could argue, an obsession. But it makes for great reading. Like, I was fascinated by it. So if you haven't seen the movie, or maybe if you have even and you want to compare notes, the book is excellent, and we have it here. It's called The Lost City of Z by David Grann. Okay, now the other couple books I want to talk about I don't have here with me, but they are available in our library catalog. I checked. So these are some older books, actually, and my mother is the one who got me into this kick of kind of, she loves a good disaster story. And so some of them are disasters, but most of them are just adventures, things that we kind of are both a little too timid to do, but like to read about. So the next two are both by the same author. His name is Thor Heyerdahl. And if you have heard of him, you have probably heard of him from his book, Kon-Tiki, which was about him building a raft in the South Pacific and going from one place to another in the South Pacific. He was a cultural explorer in that he was always trying to prove cultural assimilation, how things could have traveled in the historic world. So not when it's so easy current day, it didn't used to be, right? And so one of his main contentions was that the Mexican pyramids and the Egyptian pyramids, which were built in roughly the same time period, could have been related, that there could have been people from, it wasn't just a coincidence that two groups of people separately built these pyramids. And everybody always said, no, that can't be true because they couldn't have gotten from one place to the other. So Thor Heyerdahl, in this book, the first one I want to discuss, the Ra expeditions, he built a raft like the ancient Egyptians would have. He got scholars and historians to help him build this raft that was exactly like what the ancient Egyptians would have had. And he sailed it from there to Mexico with no assistance. Now, it doesn't go over great the first time, but he made more than one attempt, and he was successful at proving that it was possible for them to have done this. Very fascinating book, and you learn a lot about history in Mexico and Egypt and the cultural assimilation, but also just the guts he had to do this, especially more than once. It's kind of crazy. So that was one of my favorite books of his, the Ra Expeditions. But my absolute favorite book of his is called Fatu Hiva, and it is called Back to Nature is the subtitle, I think. And he, at one point in his life, married a young woman who he did not know that well, and convinced her to pick up and move to like islands around Tahiti, around Fiji, I think, actually, I'm sorry. And out in wilderness, though, they sold everything they had when they got there, and they hiked off into the jungle, and they were going to live there forever. That was the plan. I can't believe two people, let alone one, agreed to do that, but they did. And so they ended up meeting one of the last surviving cannibals that lived on the island. They did not, spoiler alert, spend the rest of their lives there, but they did spend a good amount of time there, and you get to hear all of this amazing stories about the tropical nature, and who doesn't want to go to Fiji? Like, I've always wanted to visit Fiji. So I think it's really interesting because, again, it has this cultural element, though, too, which I like, because it's teaching me about other people and the way things work in maybe a less inhabited area of the world. I've always lived in a pretty modern, not urban, but, populated area of the world. And so it's really interesting to me to imagine going somewhere where there are no people, and it's very few people, and it's just you and your thoughts. That gives me a little anxiety. But it was an excellent book. Fatu Hiva is my favorite one of his, so you could borrow that one through the system. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about another author that my mother turned me on to. His name is Tristan Jones, and he writes about sailing a lot, which my grandfather was a sailor, so I have an interest in boats and sailing and things nautical. And he has sailed a number of journeys around the world, but the one that fascinated me the most is called The Incredible Voyage by Tristan Jones. And he decided to set himself a quest to sail on both from the lowest body of water on Earth to the highest body of water on Earth. And obviously it's not a continuous trip. You have to pick the boat up at some points and move it. But he did sail in all of those places. And so the lowest point on Earth is the Dead Sea in the Middle East. And the highest point on Earth is Lake Titicaca in the Andes Mountains. And so it's all about his journey to fulfill this quest that he set for himself. It was fascinating to me. And if you are into boats or travel or adventure, this book is right up your alley. It is truly an incredible voyage, and he had me wanting to go and visit these places and see the places that he was talking about. So those are my adventure stories for this week, and I will put all of the slides at the end. And next week I have something fun planned. We're going to play a little game that I found online about just supposed situations, like if you could bring yourself back to life as a character, if you could make a fictional character, fall in love with you, if you could time travel to a certain place in time. So I found this game, and we're going to play that one next week. But in the meantime, I hope you have a great week. I hope you get into some adventures, even if they're from home. We got to rethink everything in 2020, right? It's all different this year. And if there's anything I can do to help, please let me know. And I love hearing from you, and I'm glad you're coming in for appointments and using curbside pickup. So I will talk to you next week, and happy reading, everyone.